I now call the November 14th, 2017 special meeting of the Riverton City Council to order at 7 p.m. We'll ask Councilmember Godey to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance, and after that, I'll offer an invocation.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Our dear Heavenly Father, we are grateful for the opportunity that we have to serve the citizens of Riverton as members of the City Council and staff. We pray that Thy Spirit will be with us this evening, that we might be receptive to the counsel we receive, that we'll have depth of understanding that we need for the issues that confront us, and that we might be able to make good decisions and good choices. We're thankful for the opportunity that we have to serve and pray for Thy guidance and direction. We do it in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen.
Would the City Clerk please conduct a roll call?
Yes, Your Honor. Councilman Lance Godey.
Here.
Councilman Tim Hancock.
Here.
Councilman Mike Bailey.
Here.
Councilman Kyle Larson.
Here.
Councilman Sean Peterson.
Here.
Mayor John Baker.
I'm present. The Chair will entertain a motion to excuse Councilmember Gibbon from tonight's meeting.
So moved.
Second.
And any discussion? Her son is ill this evening. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. I declare that we have a quorum. The Chair will entertain a motion for the approval of the agenda.
Motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we approve the agenda for this evening. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The first issue is the adoption of ordinance 17-026, third and final reading, planned unit development. Would the City Clerk please read ordinance number 17-026 by title only?
Yes, Your Honor. Proposed ordinance number 17-026 on third and final reading. An ordinance amending Title 17 zoning to establish Chapter 17.46 PUD combined commercial, industrial, residential, planned unit development of the Riverton Municipal Code and repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict therewith and providing for an effective date.
Thank you. The Chair would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance 17-026 on third and final reading.
Your Honor, I make a motion that we adopt ordinance 17-026 on third and final reading.
Second.
It has been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Would the City Clerk please conduct a roll call vote?
Yes, Your Honor. Councilman Lance Godey.
Aye.
Councilman Tim Hancock.
Aye.
Councilman Mike Bailey.
Aye.
Councilman Kyle Larson.
Yes.
Councilman Sean Peterson.
Aye.
Mayor John Baker.
I vote yes. The motion passes. The second item is a public hearing and consideration of ordinance number 17-028, first reading, Eastern Shoshone Planned Unit Development Zoning. Could we get the interim Community Development Director's report, please?
Thank you, Your Honor. This is the PUD, Eastern Shoshone Business Park PUD that's been proposed. And I would like to recognize in the audience is Eric Carr, the Planning Commission Vice Chairman, and Mr. Steve Wilson, who is representing the Eastern Shoshone Business Park. And this is to zone this parcel of land into the PUD. And we're here to try and give you all the information that you would need and give you the correct information.
Thank you. Would the City Clerk please read ordinance number 17-028 by title only?
Yes, Your Honor. Proposed ordinance number 17-028 on first reading. An ordinance amending the zoning district map of the City of Riverton, Wyoming, designating the zoning of Eastern Shoshone Business Park to the City of Riverton, Fremont County, Wyoming, to PUD combined commercial, industrial, residential planned unit development.
Thank you. The Chair would entertain a motion to open the public hearing.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any discussion on that? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mayor votes aye, and the motion passes. I now declare the public hearing open. The hearing will be conducted in accordance with state statutes and other applicable laws. I will ask those individuals wishing to address the council to approach the podium and identify yourselves for the record. Is there anyone in the audience that would like to speak?
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Steve Wilson. I am the development manager for the Eastern Shoshone Tribe, representing the Eastern Shoshone Business Park, PUD, this evening. I have a brief presentation that I'd like to share with you. Hopefully it'll pop right up. Take a look here. This is a planned unit development. I'm sorry. Okay. This is a planned unit development
It'll be in the packet.
proposal for zoning for the Eastern Shoshone Business Park. I would like you to understand that we've prepared this in compliance with the City of Riverton Ordinance 17.46, PUD Combined Commercial Industrial Residential Planned Unit Development. The project location, which I'm sure everyone's familiar with, is 304 acres located on the northern city limits of the City of Riverton. It's bordered by Honor Farm Road to the north, Webwood Road to the south, North Federal Boulevard to the west, and the Wyoming Heritage Trail on the southeasternmost property line. As part of the analysis that we undertook after the Eastern Shoshone Tribe purchased this property, we spent a considerable amount of time working with Ingberg Miller engineers, with the Eastern Shoshone Tribe themselves, and land planners to try to understand all the existing overall site analysis and existing conditions of the site so that we could understand how to put together a planned unit development and an overall master plan for the project, taking into account all the different variables and considerations that needed to be looked at. First, we took a look at the way the site drains and slopes. The site generally drains or slopes from the west to the east. It's pretty interesting to note that it falls as much as almost 26 feet across that entire site. I know if you're standing on Federal Boulevard and you're glancing out over it, you're going, wow, that's flat, but it's actually got quite a bit of slope to it. So all the prevailing drainage flows to the east. We looked at the existing drainage channels. RVID has a major channel that comes right through the middle of the site. And one of the things that we spent a lot of time considering and working with both the city and with our engineers and on the design of the site was moving this major drainage way all the way over to the far east property line. I'll show you that a little bit more in a minute. It should be noted that the property has an existing water line that surrounds the property on essentially three sides and goes all the way up to my paperwork's in the way of my mouse here, sorry. Water line starts down here at the corner of Webwood and North Federal Boulevard. It actually goes around the property all the way over here. It's this blue line, comes all the way up, all the way over to an existing well house and pump station that's owned by the city. It also runs the entire length of the frontage of Walmart. So there's more than adequate water supply to the existing property. Sanitary sewer is existing in Webwood Road. This line has more than adequate capacity to serve our site. Sanitary sewer can be serviced by gravity for the southern half of the property. So everything that's kind of shaded in this color right in here can all be serviced by a gravity line. Everything north of that is going to have to be served by the addition of a pump station at some time, or lift station at some point in the future. Just depends on when the development needs require development on the northern end of the property. We've coordinated all the major access locations with YDOT. They're where these stars are. Webwood Road, obviously, they're on incremental spacing, so they're essentially quarter-mile increments all up and down Federal Boulevard. This gave us the ability to say these are the major access locations and entryways into the project, so we would build our grid internally off those access locations. We took a look at the existing trails. We know that the Wyoming Heritage Trail that runs along our southeast border is an important element to the project and connects the city of Riverton to this property, and all the way throughout the city. We also wanted to take note that there's a few existing trees, not many on this property, actually. There's only a few right here, and one lone tree up on the north end. The other thing we wanted to take into consideration was the wind direction, and everybody that lives here knows the winds come out of the west and the northwest, so we wanted to understand that as well and put that into our design and thinking. It's also worthy to note that the area shown here in red is where the existing Modelers Park is today. When we purchased the property, they had an existing lease in place through October of 2019, which we've honored and continue to honor, and we're working with them on the possibility of being able to extend that on maybe an annualized basis, and we'll work with them between now and the near future to try to accommodate something for them there as well. We took all that information that we understood from the existing conditions, and we started taking a look at where the land use areas, where they made sense, and where potentially various uses should be. And one of the things we started to realize right away was obviously everything along the frontage of Federal Boulevard and the highway is where the commercial activity needs to occur. We also felt like the residential activity needed to occur along the Heritage Trail on the south end of the property in close proximity to some existing schools and where residential is today. We felt that in the center of the property was a great location for office, commercial, and maybe some light industrial area. And we feel that there's probably a pent-up need for some of that. And then we took a large portion of this property and we said, hey, I think there's an opportunity for some sort of a regional event center. And maybe let's zone this in a PUD and event. And so we put all that kind of big thoughts to paper and spent some time planning, and we came up with what our actual master plan today, conceptual master plan, would look like. And as you can see, this is the existing Walmart. So we're thinking, and this is concept-wise, we know that this property probably has a 25-year development cycle, maybe longer than that in Riverton. But we wanted to give a good roadmap and something that everybody could plan from and have a future to look to. And not that it isn't going to change at some point in the future, possibly could, but at least we have a roadmap today to say, hey, let's see what we can do to conceive this ultimate type master plan. So what we did is we said, hey, let's run the commercial corridor and continue it with our major access points right up Federal, various types of commercial activity that could happen here, from hotels to shopping centers to pads to financial institutions. All kinds of things can happen there. And it's going to take, obviously, a long period of time for those to absorb and for those to develop. On the southeastern edge of the property, we feel there's opportunity for probably some single-family residential, some multifamily, maybe townhome duplex type opportunity. We think that maybe there's some potential for a retirement type community, assisted living. We also think there's an opportunity for multifamily apartments. And so all those things are part of our zoning and are accommodated in the southeastern portion of the site. We also said, hey, let's take a look at this center core. This is what the commercial industrial area potentially conceptually could look like. We think there could be some warehousing in there. We think there could be some office medical in there. We think there could be just some light industrial in there. Manufacturing, those type of uses would fit well in this location. And then we took this large parcel on the north half of the property and said, I think there's an opportunity to create some sort of an event area here. I spent a considerable amount of time with Councilman Peterson talking about the ball fields and the need for a relocation of those. I spent time with the Fair Board talking to them about the need of potential maybe relocation of the fairgrounds. And so while I don't think any of this can happen overnight, I think if it's planned and it's thought through, there's certainly an opportunity to create some sort of an event area in this particular area, with with Riverton being a central location in Wyoming. What a great place for it. And so, that would be our goal, to start to work towards what we could do in that area. And then we had, as I mentioned earlier, we had taken all the drainage on our site, and we put it into a major drainage channel that runs the entire length of the east property line that would accommodate all the drainage for the facility, detention, retention, whatever needs to be required. Probably creates an opportunity to create some kind of a water feature in there as well at some point in the future. I don't know when that happens, but we wanted to get that into our thought process. So that's what the overall master plan looks like that we built the PUD around. So essentially, you have in front of you tonight this Eastern Shoshone Business Park PUD, and these are the development guidelines. I'm not going to go into them all, but I at least want to highlight a few things. This is the actual zoning map itself. This map shows exactly the areas that are designated to be commercial, residential, office commercial, event, open space, and right-of-way. While I would expect those potentially could change in minor shape and form, that's generally where they need to be. The access locations off Federal are where they generally need to be or where they need to be. So this would be the map that would get adopted as part of that PUD zoning. And then I think probably most importantly, this is what this master plan PUD establishes. It establishes the policy and intent for the development of this project. It establishes all the permitted uses and the prohibited uses in each one of those zone districts. It establishes the major access locations. It establishes setbacks, maximum FAR, and it also lays out the approval process through the city for approval of individual site plans and plats as they come through the development process. It also provides all the development standards. So it tells you the heights of buildings and what they can be. It tells you what the roadways need to look like and what size they need to be. How they need to be constructed. It talks about drainage and how the drainage needs to be accommodated, signage for each individual parcel and buildings. It talks about parking, how much parking is required for each individual use or individual uses. It defines an architecture style that needs to be carried out, and so the thought here is we have an architectural theme that would be carried out through the entire project. It's not that everything's going to look the same, but it's going to have certain elements in it that keep it consistent throughout, so 20, 30 years from now, everybody can say, hey, this was well thought out. It talks about what fences are allowed and heights and requirements. It talks about lighting, and then it also talks about landscaping and what the minimum landscape requirements are going to be. So it has a lot of things that the current existing city code doesn't account for, but we've built them in here so that everything is cohesive, and that's what we feel was really important. So that's what this PUD establishes. We also took it a step further, and as part of our PUD, we also prepared an overall geotechnical investigation for the 300 acres. That's been included in the packet. It's part of the PUD ordinance requirements. We did an overall preliminary drainage study and design to talk about how we would accommodate the drainage for the entire project and how it would work on the eastern property line and how those ponds would need to be sized in order to accommodate the outfall that exists today. We did a traffic impact study for the entire project that we have submitted to YDOT and to the city that identifies the access points and also identifies what improvements would be necessary along the state highway. And then we took that a step further and we said, we understand that what we think our first phase of development opportunity is for this project is what you see highlighted off to the right in this area right here. And we feel that that is probably the construction of a couple access points off of Federal Boulevard with a spine running down to the south behind Walmart and connecting into Webbwood Road, which allows the extension of infrastructure from the city of Riverton and development opportunity to occur in this quadrant, this quadrant, this quadrant, this quadrant, and actually this quadrant right here. So utilities, infrastructure would be extended there. So we've gone to the work to do all the preliminary civil plans for the first phase with the roadway design, drainage and drainage design, water system, sanitary, and storm sewer design. So we built that first package so we understand exactly what we need to do. This is a concept of what we believe the first phase of the Shoshone Business Park Retail Center might look like. And we're on the heels of this adoption, hopefully, of this approval of this PUD, we'll start to bring some of the ideas and thoughts in this forward. So that's what I have prepared, or we've prepared, as part of our PUD for the Eastern Shoshone Business Park. I'm happy to answer questions and comments. I didn't dive down into this really deep. I know you guys have had these packets for a while, and so I'm happy to address anything you guys may have.
Have any questions, council?
Overwhelming.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Wilson. Is there anybody else who would like to talk about this?
Thank you, Your Honor, Council. My name is Eric Carr. I am the Vice Chair for the Riverton Planning Commission, and just wanted to say a few quick words about the PUD that's presently in front of you, or the proposal. Obviously, the Planning Commission has seen this, and generally speaking, with the current commission that we have today, is excited about the work that they've done and has recommended approval for the PUD. So if you have any questions for me, I'd be happy to answer those.
Your Honor.
Go ahead.
I'd be curious, Eric, if you could maybe explain or get, the joke around here is I'm still new, so I get to be the new guy and being able to kind of ask as far as details. I mean, we've seen something that looks like details, but just how detailed from the Planning Commission are what we're seeing today in what the eventuality is. Can you maybe walk through the process of helping us understand when is it truly detail right now, when is it truly conceptual? I understand it is mostly conceptual at this point, but maybe it would be helpful to walk through the process to understand when it becomes detail.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. Right now, the PUD itself that is in front of you will define how this very large piece of property is developed in the future. And so when it is ultimately subdivided into smaller and smaller lots, this provides guidance for anyone that's wanting to purchase those and develop those individual lots. And it gives one of the benefits to the PUD, and any PUD, as long as they're thoughtfully constructed, offers continuity and eliminates the dangerous pitfall of institutional knowledge, because this development, as Steve indicated, will likely extend past most of our public service lives. So the institutional knowledge that we gain today that says we want X, Y, and Z may or may not get passed down to individual lot buyers. If we rezone the area as a PUD, they have an outline well past our useful service life. So, and to specifically your question about development versus conceptualization of the plan, I think if you follow the money they've paid for the design of the streets, that's probably fairly concrete at this point. But as far as anything else, very conceptual in nature.
Mike?
And again, sort of follow up on that same thing. So as I would understand it, if they get one of these blocks, the next block to the north of Walmart, for example, somebody comes in and wants to develop that and purchase it, then they would come with a replat and identify specifically what they're going to do with a section?
As per not only the PUD, but Riverton City Code and Ordinance, yes, they would have to approach Planning Commission and then ultimately City Council.
Right, which would lay out specific property lines and lots and...
Yes, sir. Yes. Okay. Easements, right-of-ways, yes.
Right. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Doesn't appear that there's anybody else that wants to speak about this issue. The chair would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Motion to close public hearing.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded that we close the public hearing. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mayor votes aye, and I now declare the public hearing to be closed. The chair would entertain a motion to adopt ordinance number 17-028 on first reading.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Thank you. We're now going to convene into a work session. And so the chair would entertain a motion to convene into a work session.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Mayor votes aye, and the motion passes. The first item on the agenda for this evening's work session is from Idea Inc. Annual Report. So Kevin Kershiznik is going to give us that report. Trade computers here.
All right, Your Honor, members of the council, Kevin Kershiznik, like the mayor had said, with Idea Inc. Today, I have a couple of members of the board with me here. Alan Moore, who is the president and chairman. I'm vice chairman and executive director, and Lee Harriman is the secretary treasurer. I think you know most. Let's see. Okay, and that should cover who's here. So what we wanted to do today is just give you a quick update on what Idea Inc.'s been doing, where we're at from an economic development standpoint. Handed out two documents to you. One is the PowerPoint presentation, and then the second one is the strategic plan for economic development that was published back in 2006. And at the end, we would ask that the council would entertain updating that, and we'd be more than willing to assist in that effort. So we'll take you through a couple of slides here. Just to refresh your memory, the economic development building blocks put forth by WIDA and the Wyoming Business Council, these are critical. The bottom, the base, is what is really important. You need to have this stable, supportive public service and policies to support economic development. Here in Riverton, we believe we have that, thanks to folks on the council and many members in the city of Riverton. So we have a good foundation. Then the next stage there, as you can see those three blocks, the red ones, that's really what has to be in place in order to have economic development opportunities for existing businesses and new businesses. So the quality of life, workforce development, and the infrastructure development. And we spent a fair amount of time on the infrastructure, and we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go through the presentation here. Then 95% of the effort really should be spent with your existing businesses and entrepreneurs. That's where you're going to see the majority of your economic development and majority of your growth in your economy. The top part is the flashy part. That's recruiting new businesses, and we've been working with the Business Council to do that. It takes a lot of effort, success rate relatively low, so we've not spent a ton of time on that, but we have spent some, and we'll talk about that here in a minute. So these are some other economic development organizations that assist us. The new one since last time is the Endow, which I think most of you are familiar with that, but that's economically needed diversification opportunities for Wyoming, put forth by Governor Meade, and he has a board that is working on that. They've actually put together an initial report that came out in August, and there'll be another one coming out in December, with the final report being August of 2018. So a lot of the things that they're talking about at the state level affects us, and we parallel them as well in what's important for how do we achieve diversification, how important infrastructure is, for example, air service, broadband connectivity, some common themes at the state level as well as locally. The Central Wyoming College is also a great asset for us, and I talked to President Tyndall. He would like to be involved with the strategic planning session as we go forward, and they're a very integral part to our community and a great partner for economic development. Go up one more. So IDEA Inc. is actually an acronym. Some people know this, others don't, but it's actually to improve and develop economic activity for the city of Riverton, and we've kind of expanded that a little bit in Fremont County. And so we've done a project in Shoshone, as you guys are well aware, of the rail car facility, and so that's why that's in there that way. This is the board, the IDEA board, and our leaders in the front there, Mr. Moore, and the shortest one. And he'll take you through a few things with IDEA Inc. But the important thing to note is that it's a volunteer board. All the members there donate their time, anywhere between, I would guess, between at least 100 hours a year up to 500 hours a year. Volunteer time to better Riverton. So they do a great job moving things forward. And Alan, would you like to cover the IDEA Inc.? All right, then we'll just keep going. So that's the board, and behind that is the Brunton building that probably several of you recognize. That was done with a BRC grant. There were a couple things done with lease agreements to retain them as a company here in Riverton, and we just worked on a new lease agreement this last year with them to keep Brunton Outdoor here, and we actually had the lease agreement structured such that their rent rate is commensurate or is proportionate with the employment rate. So as their employment goes up, the rent lease rate drops. So we're putting incentives out there for both sides of the economic development. So IDEA Inc., the structure is it's a 501c4. The corporation is formed in 1985. With a volunteer board, as I mentioned. We have two sister organizations that you're probably aware of. The first one is RECDA, and they meet once a month, and we talk about different economic development issues for the city. Many of you have attended those meetings, and they're very beneficial, and Mr. Wilson actually gave us a presentation last year on that master plan. So it's a great venue to share business ideas, to address issues that are in our community. And then the other sister organization is the Depot Foundation, which is a 501c3, and its qualified charitable contributions have helped quite a few organizations here in Riverton. And I'll talk about that in just a minute. Here's the IDEA Inc. projects. And the first one, Brunton Fiskars, Phoenix, that whole deal that I just briefly mentioned, it's the building up on the top there. That was done with the BRC grant, and continue to move that company forward. They have about 21 employees, going to be hiring another 4. It's mainly manufacturing. And if I take you back to 5-6 years ago, it used to have all of the disciplines from a company standpoint here, so sales, marketing, customer service, et cetera. And one of the reasons they said that they moved to Boulder, the sales, customer service departments, was that air service was so poor here. And that was part of the reason they gave us at that time. It became an initiative for us to help improve the air service as well. The BTI railcar facility, that's over in Shoshone, and that is a facility that is basically owned by IDEA Inc. in the city, and then BTI leases that, and then they sublease it to a company now called Wasatch Rail. And Wasatch, they repair rail cars, they refurbish transportation cars, and they just received their certification to do the full repair for the rail cars, so the tankers, oil tankers, et cetera. Their employment's at about 12 right now. They expect it to go up to about 25. So things are good there. The IDEA building, which is where Bell's is and Legacy, take you back, I was in '09, and that's when we acquired that building that had sat on the market for almost 2 decades, vacant. When it was originally the Alco building, sat there vacant. The reason for that was that the owners of that building had a long-term lease with Alco. Alco was still paying them over a period of time. There was not a financial incentive for them to put somebody else in there. But when that lease was up, there was an incentive, and and Mr. Moore and the Business Council, they were able to move forward, and Idea Inc. actually purchased that building with the BRC grant. Since then, we've been able to retain Legacy Molding in town. Legacy Molding is actually expanding. They're incorporating robotics into their process so they can be competitive well into the future and continue to hire folks there. The other one is Bell's, which is, you can see in the center, and they actually, for this region, the western region of the U.S., are #1 in customer service and #2 in sales presently. So business is going pretty well for them. They continue to do well, and they're bringing new products in. So with the proceeds from some of these buildings you see here, what we're able to do is take those funds, roll them back in. We put a new roof on that building, and then we also basically built out a white, what they call a vanilla shell, which is drywall bathrooms on the west suite. So we have another suite now that is move-in ready for a retailer. And so we've been able to move forward with, again, the proceeds from these buildings. Smart Start, which is the daycare, which has just been phenomenal for the community, for people to be able to bring their kids to, leave them there, get a great education, know they're safe. They continue to increase the workforce by having the daycare available. And the last item we show there is the growth, where, to take you back, before Mr. Wilson, we were actually the organization that nominated the land, the Honor Farm land, surplus land, for auction. And just a rough idea, that took about 34 months to complete, cost somewhere around $250,000 in economic development effort, sweat equity, et cetera, to bring that to auction. So those are some of the projects that Idea Inc. has done. The Depot Foundation, it's cut off a little bit on the bottom there. But anyway, the first part is the Riverwalk project, which is the 200 acres down by the Riverwalk, connects the rails to trails back to behind the fairgrounds, and that was paved. I think most of you have been down there. There's quite a few things, quite a few improvements. There's a fire pit, et cetera. The bark that was down there, the Job Corps students actually came down and spread that out for us, did a great job. So it's been a big community effort, and we have some other plans to improve that property, of which we'd like to work with you guys at the city, because once that land's paid for, then it would become your property. So the other items we've done is to assist the Police Foundation, Wyoming Modelers Park, Central Wyoming Skate Park Skateboard Association, Fremont Air Service Task Force, and the Splash Pad. So just a real quick recap, 2017, a lot of the effort for Idea Inc. was spent retaining those businesses that we just previously mentioned on our projects, to ensure that their businesses are doing well, to make sure the revenue stream's there for the buildings, et cetera, so we can use that for economic development. The cash flow from that we've been able to use for multiple things: improvement of buildings, also to support air service. So we were able to help Fremont Air Service Task Force, FAST, about $50,000 last year and pretty much $50,000 this year for support of air service to move that forward, which is very critical for our community. We also support the board, so we're on the board and active in the committee and moving things forward. Next item on there, the optional sales tax. So we started an initiative, several people in the community, talking about the optional sales tax for economic development. We've had our second committee meeting, and we're going to put together a proposal to the council such that hopefully you would have passed a resolution, or pass a resolution that would allow us to put that on the ballot for the general election in 2018. So we have a meeting this Friday. We hope to finalize what that would look like from a resolution standpoint, and then present that to you for your consideration. What we would use those funds for is, first off, for air service, back to the infrastructure. Remember those building blocks? We have to get our infrastructure in place. The first thing is going to be for air service. Presently, City of Riverton, City of Lander, and the county are supporting the MRG, the minimum revenue guarantee. That continues. If we were to get this tax in place, that would be something then that could be paid by the taxpayers for air service to ensure that we could have air service without having the cities, municipalities, or the county step up and have to do that. So that would be the first part. The second part we would use it for is broadband connectivity. Talk about the unified network and how we have excellent connectivity throughout the state, which is true from a backbone perspective, but not from the last mile perspective. So we need to get conduits, we need to get fiber in the last mile to the businesses, to the houses, so that they can utilize the bandwidth that's available on the unified network. So those are the top two initiatives we're looking at as a committee to use these tax dollars for. The other items we've been working on are business retention, I should say business retention and expansion, which is an interview process that the Wyoming Business Council has put forth. They have a synchronous database that's collecting all of this data, so each of the communities would put data in there, and then we could be able to search and say, okay, what type of businesses do we have? Where are our gaps? What's the gap analysis say that we need to recruit in our areas? How can we help our existing businesses? What do they need? Is it air service? Is it workforce, which we hear quite a bit? And what type of workforce training do they need? That could come back to the ties with the job, Central Wyoming College, University of Wyoming, et cetera. So it's just a nice database that we can put in place. Then we've supported two proposals to date this year for the from the Wyoming Business Council to recruit companies. One was an IT company that required broadband connectivity and air service. The second one was a manufacturer that required air service, reliable air service in and out of Riverton. So we've submitted those proposals. They usually take a while to gestate, if you will, to determine whether they're going to visit site locations or not. But we've done that, and we've also helped two others that weren't necessarily looking to come here from the Wyoming Business Council, through the Wyoming Business Council, but they were actually called us directly. Said, hey, I want to start this energy company, I want to do this type of manufacturing company, can you help me? And so we've helped them. The other part that is critical is we spend a lot of time working with the Wyoming Business Resource Network, which is, again, those are state funds that go through the Business Council to the University of Wyoming, and then it's SBDC, the Small Business Development Center, PTAC, the Government Procurement, Manufacturing Works, and Market Research. Those organizations are available to all businesses here in Wyoming free. They do various research. They will provide services to the businesses for free as part of the taxpayer dollars that come through. And so we've been out there promoting that and letting people know that that service is available for businesses to take advantage of. And we assisted about 10 entrepreneurs. Again, they'll come in, and so the first thing they're looking for a lot of times is a business plan. We'll shoot them straight over to the SBDC. So the Small Business Development Center is right next to my office at the Chamber. So Sarah Hamlin will be able to help them out. The Wyoming Business Council has an office there, and the Chamber. So it's a nice one-stop shop for people that are looking for business assistance to come into and get the answers that they need. And then, of course, the RECDA meetings, which I mentioned, we do that monthly. The next one's coming up on the 29th of November, and the Honor Farm will be giving a presentation about their outreach programs and what's going on out there. So I encourage everybody to go. All right, so there's a couple of agreements that are in place, and you guys had that in the initial packets that I would have sent out to you guys when you first became council members and maybe more recently. You won't necessarily see it in the package you have today, but there's an agreement, there's an MOU between ID Inc. and the city of Riverton saying this is what would go forward for economic development purposes. And it's been in place since 2007. You can see economic development and general area marketing. And then it was determined, the city determined that ID Inc. can provide an effective and efficient means of promoting economic development for the community. So those are just a couple of the excerpts from that. Here's the details of what's in there. You can see 1 through 6. First one is really to be the main POC, point of contact, for various organizations to get information coming into the city for economic development purposes. The second one is really where a lot of the work is done, which is the RECDA, the business retention, business recruitment, et cetera. As we look at the bandwidth for that, ID Inc. is a volunteer board, and the executive director, myself, is a paid position, but it's only 2 days a week. So that's the total bandwidth that we have to do a lot of these projects. And so prioritizing them is important. We want to make sure we're doing the most important things. And that's where we'll need your guys' assistance and input to make sure that we're on the right track. So the reporting requirements are here, is that we're in communication. One city council member or staff is on the IDEA board. So Tony Tolstead is now on the board with us and participating in the last meeting, and he'll continue down that path. The mayor's participated in meetings as well. And so it's a very important part for us to make sure that we have the information, the day-to-day tactical information conveyed to the city and back to make sure that we're strategically going in the right direction. And then some reports. Here, this is one of them, to make sure that the city knows what IDEA Inc. is doing and to make sure that we're doing that as you wish. This document I did hand out to you. This is the strategic plan for economic development. And the way that came about was the city's master plan was created, and as a subset of that was the strategic plan for economic development. As you can see in the top left of that document, this was created in 2006. So, probably long overdue for an update, in our opinion. And we've addressed several of the things. You can see some of the progress sections there, and you can read through them. And what we would propose is that we look at that document and then work on an update for 2018, either with this document specifically or as part of the city's master plan. So the way it happened in the past, master plan, we had all the input from the different citizens in the different verticals, if you will. I know manufacturing, we had one. We had a small committee that met, and we provided input. All that data was compiled, put into the master plan, and then this is a subset of that. So that's a quick update of where we're at, what we've done, and next slide. Just, questions or comments. If you want to see any of the properties, you want to attend any of the board meetings, you're more than welcome. Just let me know, or Alan, and we'll be pleased to accommodate.
Thank you, Kevin. Does anybody have any questions for Kevin that we could?
Any plans in terms of what you think needs to be updated of the plan?
So in there, I think some of the sections were pretty good. So if you look at section 1, they're talking about increasing the average wage, increasing the employment. And those are some of the initiatives that we were talking about for the sales tax for economic development, is to increase the standard of living, the base wage, if you will, for the average citizen of Fremont County. I think that's a very admirable and good goal that we should retain. And then the diversification is probably one that we need to look at. What exactly do we want Riverton to be or to continue to be? Is it, what core industries do we want to focus on? Obviously, energy is a big part. You have a manufacturing hub to a certain degree. And if those are the ones we wanted to focus on, or do we want to expand and say, let's do high tech? And if so, then we should try to recruit and try to help these companies expand that are in the high tech bubble. Or maybe it's agriculture. It depends on what verticals we want to address. I'd recommend looking at the Endow to see what sectors they're talking about, and then look at the subset that would be germane to Riverton, would be my recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if we need a committee, a couple of council members to work with Kevin, maybe somebody else on the IDEA Inc. board, and kind of go down through this economic development plan, the strategic plan, and see what we could bring back to council as a recommendation. Okay,
That would be good.
would that work out for you? You think we could pull something together like that? Is there anybody on the, Mike says he's got a finger up that he's in, Tim says yes. Okay. Lance says yes. Okay.
I know Holly and I have spoken before, and she's interested as well.
Maybe it's bigger.
We may need to be.
Maybe it's bigger than that. Maybe we need to have.
We wouldn't be here if we didn't want to have investment in the city. So
Yeah.
every one of us should be having our hand up.
Well, okay, so what do you think about the process of doing that? You want to do this as a council?
I think we
and
talked
have-
about it last year, and I think it kind of got pushed off to the side that we were going to try to do maybe a meeting back there at some point and sit down around a table and do that, and then it kind of got pushed to the side. Sorry, Lance. But I think that would be a good idea, is to schedule something. I don't know if it's a work session or if it's just sitting around a table and kind of go down it, spend an hour or two somewhere to try to work this out to bring something in front. So, I don't know.
Okay, it looks to me like most of the members of the council really want to be involved in this.
Great.
So we'll do we'll try to plan another work session on this, where what we're really going to talk about is just that strategic plan for economic development, and we'll commit an evening to it, and maybe more if we need to, in order to come up with something like that. Tony's nodding his head; he's got that figured out. Okay?
Excellent.
So we'll try to pull something together like that and see how we can work through it. Okay?
Great.
We appreciate everything you do, Kevin. And Alan Moore, thank you for your interest in the city of Riverton. And thank you for coming tonight. I was while Courtney Bolander was the interim city administrator, I was the interim delegate to the Idea Inc. board. And so now that we've got Tony on board, he's going to be the regular member who attends that meeting. But I do appreciate everything you've done there. I've been able to, attend those meetings and see that the concern that you guys have had for the city of Riverton over the years and the impact that it's had, and grateful for your efforts. Thank you.
Great. Thank you.
You bet. The next item for our work session tonight is snow removal. And could we get the Public Works Director's report, please?
Yes, thank you, Your Honor. Before you this evening is a draft policy of the Snow and Ice Control Plan. This policy was drafted following the October 10th work session of the City Council. At that work session, the council directed staff to do a few things, the first of which was to draft a policy that implemented a combined snowplow approach of going to the center and to the side, to look at the possibility of providing service on local or residential streets. And then third was to analyze our current fiscal year to see if there are opportunities to fund equipment and other avenues of that nature. So I hope each of you have had the opportunity to review that policy, and this evening we would definitely welcome your feedback. To work through that in a brief manner, the policy has tried to address the following issues. First and foremost, the overall objective for the city for snow and ice control operations, the authority delegated to staff to implement a snow and ice control plan, how the snow and ice control operations would commence, the priorities for snow plowing and de-icing, snow removal operations, so that's what we do with our snow blower, and then also it discusses available equipment. Finally, it also addresses communications and the fact that this plan will be placed online and made available to the public. Without going through each and every detail of the policy, to highlight what the council gave us direction on, the proposed plan addresses the combination approach of center to side and side to center operations with the following statement. Operations division staff, will incorporate a combination of plowing from the center of the street to the side and plowing from the side of the street to the center. Variables determining the manner by which streets are plowed will depend on traffic volumes, street widths, adjacent improvements, and seasonal storm conditions. Operations Division staff will continually review and monitor how plowing methods perform on each of the prioritized service areas. When we consider this policy, we see this as an enabling policy. It talks about what the city staff can do following your direction. When we look at this upcoming snow season, however, what we want to do is really hone down the best practices for the combined center and side approach. At this time, staff proposes two ways of doing that. The first of which will implement a combined approach based off of snow accumulation levels. Based off of accumulations of snow, we will modify our center-to-side or side-to-center approach. For example, when snowstorms accumulate on our city streets at a volume higher than 4 inches, roads like North 8th West, Webwood, Broadway, Sunset, Pershing, Park, Adams, and Monroe would be plowed to the center. Others would be plowed to the side. The other approach that we'd like to implement and assess is a combined approach based off of the width of streets. We propose at this time that corridors that are prioritized that are less than 35 feet in width will be plowed to the center. We also looked at the possibility of having third parties assist with the city's snow and ice control operations. The proposed policy states the following. When winter storm conditions warrant, the Public Works Director may supplement the city's snow and ice control operations with third-party contractors. Contracted entities will be required to provide proof of insurance and shall be responsible for any damage made to public infrastructure. When the cost of contracting with third-party entities exceed available budgeted funds, the city administrator may request an additional allocation of funds from the city council. Naturally, each year will dictate how third-party contractors will be used. There are several variables that would affect it. Seasonality of winter storms, accumulation of storms, the availability of labor, and other variables of that nature, and I won't spend too much time on that. After looking into several options for local and residential streets, the proposed policy states the following. Local and residential streets are not intended to receive regular winter maintenance. However, requests for maintenance at specific locations may be made by calling the Public Works Service line. Requested locations will be inspected for snow and ice conditions that warrant attention to eliminate severe hazards. Local and residential streets will receive service only after the above referenced priorities are treated. The above referenced priorities are the priorities listed in the policy, just for clarification. Are treated and only when conditions warrant. Street width, parking, drainage, and other considerations will be considered when determining the appropriate service response in warranted areas. In light of the equipment and personnel availabilities that we have with the City of Riverton, it's just not feasible to provide regular local or residential snow and ice control services. However, we do want to address severe instances and provide the public an opportunity to contact us and give us an opportunity as staff to respond to those concerns. When looking at the possibility of providing service in all of our neighborhood streets, there's a challenge of getting to the neighborhood streets in a timely manner. By the time we would finish our priorities, we would be very far behind a storm, and ice pack would already occur in many of our neighborhood streets. Additionally, the question of equitably treating all of our neighborhoods is not easily answered. Which neighborhood deserves priority over another with the resources we have is something that is very hard to address. And it's also very hard to address which arterial or collector or school zone will be prioritized behind a neighborhood street when we look at the availability we have and our distribution of resources. However, again, this policy is an enabling policy. In years where storm events present a state of emergency, there is an opportunity for the City Council to allocate funds and direct staff to utilize third-party contractors to help in local and residential streets. I believe that covers the main questions that were brought up in our work session. I do want to address that staff would like to propose a follow-up work session following this winter season, most likely in the months of April or May. During that work session, we would like to present information to you as a council gathered throughout this year, where we can talk about the center and side operations that we implemented. And then also, we're excited because we are implementing ways of better tracking each storm. We have an iWork system. It's a software that enables us to track our resources, and we've already put together staff sheets that are in every single truck at this time so that staff can report how many hours they put on an an area, the amount of material that they lay down, and then we also will be tracking the amount of storm, the overtime, et cetera. So we look forward to reporting back to you the amount of effort that's put towards snow removal this season and an opportunity to receive your feedback in the spring. Alternatives to the policy are obviously something that we are welcome to hearing from you at this time. When we consider the budget impact of the policy, there's no immediate impact to adopting the policy. However, when we think of future implications, that would depend on whether or not the city utilizes third-party contractors. Again, there are variables that dictate from a year-to-year basis if those contractors are used and to what extent. Staff did take the opportunity, however, to speak with local contractors to get an idea of what a cost may be in utilizing their services. It is estimated from these conversations that labor and equipment rates combined could range from $85 to $100 an hour. When we look at one storm event, it could be that third-party contracting could cost the city up to $6,000 to $7,000, depending on the amount of work that is required at that time. And much of that is just the calculation of hauling. Another direction that staff received was to look at the possibilities within the current fiscal year to augment our operations and our equipment. As you remember from our budget process last spring, there was an opportunity to purchase a used snowplow truck from Campbell County Airport. We have reached out again and contacted Campbell County Airport, and they are very open to making that truck available to the city of Riverton again. That being said, ultimate decision will be made by the Campbell County Commission, and that's something that we will need to work through following your direction. Estimated price for that used piece of equipment will be around $70,000. When looking at part-time seasonal help, one part-time employee would have a budgetary impact of approximately $13,000. With the help of Mrs. Harris, we've been able to look at the current position of the city's budget and cash accounts, specifically in regards to the purchase of this used plow truck. And due to a legislative recalculation of the direct distribution formula, so our supplemental funds, the city of Riverton will receive an additional $163,000 to those funds. This, in addition to receipt of unbudgeted revenues from the Wyoming Department of Transportation, makes this purchase possible for a used truck. As you remember, and I definitely welcome Mrs. Harris for her feedback to make sure I don't speak any blasphemies about the budget. But as you remember, with our capital purchases, there will go into our reserve accounts this year. The positive that Mrs. Harris was able to communicate to me was with this recalculation of supplemental funds, we are still able to purchase a truck and avoid going into our reserve account for the current capital budget. And that's obviously considering the state that we're at this time. With that run through, I apologize for being a little wordy, but I wanted to make sure that I communicated to the public and those in the audience what the policy proposes and what our plan is as we look into this year's snow season. I welcome any questions at this time.
Thank you. Council, you got any questions? Lance?
I'll start. I appreciate the idea definitely of a end-of-year report at the end of the season, but I'm thinking, given the amount of feedback that we've gotten and continue to get on this issue, that it may even be worthwhile to ask for monthly reports so that we can adapt throughout the season and be able to be a little bit more flexible in our response. If something's not working, we don't want to wait until next year after this year to fix it. So, hopefully we can be a little bit more dynamic in our responses. So I would like to at least ask, and I'm sure we'd probably get it. It's not something I think we should just plan to wait for April or May, but maybe a formal report at least once a month at one of the council meetings as to how's the past couple weeks or the past month's snow removal been working, to see if there's a need for changes. One thought.
Mr. Larson.
Mr. Butterfield, what if by some grace that our accounting is good and the purchase of the snow plow truck was allowed, what would that do for us in cleaning and maintaining and improving the snow removal?
Your Honor, Councilman Larson, that additional truck will assist us in being more timely and effective on those prioritized streets. The addition of that one truck gives us more options, but not enough options to get into the entire neighborhoods of the city of Riverton. What it will also do is assist us during equipment challenges. As you remember from the reports that were provided to you last year, equipment goes down on a regular basis and we find ourselves behind storms, and so that additional truck will keep us at a more stable, keep us on a more stable footing as we attack each storm, even when we have equipment challenges.
Go ahead, Mr. Larson.
Do you anticipate any no parking during certain hours for snow removal? I know that's done in a lot of cities where off-street, you must not park on off-street at certain times. Is that in the foreseeable future?
Your Honor, Councilman Larson, that's something that we've discussed, and I've seen that in other communities. At this time, it's not something staff is recommending to council, but it is something that we could re-examine with your direction.
Mr. Bailey?
Thank you, Your Honor. Again, I still have some heartburn with plowing to the side on Main and Federal, because those streets get, 20,000 cars a day go down them. Those are where the majority of our businesses lie. And plowing to the side just makes access in and out of businesses very challenging. If we have a winter like we did last year, we end up with an 8-foot wide, 2.5, 3-foot deep windrow on the side of each road that somehow the business owners got to get cleared out for people to even be able to get in and out of their businesses. I know in downtown Maine, we've always plowed to the center, which again gets those parking spaces cleared out. I would agree with Mr. Larson that maybe even having some no parking during certain hours so that the crews can get in and plow the parking spaces and everything to the center so that there's, place to park. I know my wife's business up on Main Street last year, I tried to get up and plow it with my own plow truck and got stuck because the snow was so deep you couldn't even get the snow plow through when it was up. And so, it really becomes super challenging for those businesses. And I think those high traffic streets, Main and Federal especially, it would be more pertinent to do like we're saying for North 8th and some of those where maybe anything over 4 inches that we plow to the center. If it's less than 4 inches, that's probably not near as big of a deal. But when we get these 1-foot snowstorms, it really becomes a challenge in those parking areas, and we end up with people stuck and can't get out, and then we can't plow because there's people stuck there, and it just snowballs, no pun intended.
Is there anybody in the audience that would like to comment? Go ahead, have at it.
Mr. Mayor, council members, my name is Ray Apodak. I'm a contractor here in Riverton, building contractor, and my wife owns a business up on West Main, and I'd like to comment on why you shouldn't plow to the curb. And as Mr. Bailey has spoken, what it does to the businesses, but not only it damages the curbs. And last year on Federal, every approach was full of water. And when you have storm drains, the water can't go there. So what happens, it builds up at the approaches and then goes between the asphalt and the concrete, starts heaving it, and pretty soon you start they're going to do a new road out here, on next to Walmart, Federal. And up in my wife's business last year, I go up at 3 o'clock in the morning and I clear everything, even on the other side of the curb. The city comes along, throws it back on there, and then it gets warm. Everything's flowing towards the hill. It can't get to the storm drain, so then it builds up high enough where, 10 inches to a foot on the approach. People couldn't even walk across there on the sidewalk because there was ice on the sidewalk. And half the time I'd go up there and what the city pushed to the side, I'd put on our own lot. And so what I'm saying, the streets are crowned to the curb. So if you take the snow to the curb, then what happens when it warms up in the afternoon? The water drains to the curb, freezes, and then I see the city the next day with their auger trying to scoop it up. They can't because it's frozen. So then they get the blade, and they're in there, and they've got another machine. I don't think they're speeding it up by doing that. And they did it forever, taking it to the center. I see cars stuck in approaches all the time. And I agree with Mike. These businesses are the ones that are paying the taxes. If you shut down the roasted bean, they have a lot of people that park right along that street there. And if they can't park there, they're just going to bypass it. The taxes are what paid for the street removal, the snow removal, and so you don't want to shut the businesses down, and you don't want to damage the street. It's pretty common sense stuff. Lander doesn't plow to the curb. They get in there and they push to the middle and they get it out of there. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
Oops.
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah.
I'm at kind of a disadvantage here because my hearing is such that I hear voices, but I can't discern the words all that much. So I'm going to read into the record the prepared remarks that I have concerning snow removal. For the record, my name is Carol Anderson. The Ranger article, City Plans Changes in Snow Removal, was so foreign to my 46 years of experience with the city plowing snow to the center and 3 years of experience of plowing snow to the curb that it was a difficult read. There are several things I could comment on besides the two I've already addressed, one in a letter to the editor and one to you last week at the council meeting. I will address two more tonight. The portion highlighted in yellow states, in addition, the snow often melts and freezes across travel lanes when it is plowed to the middle. As a result, even though the method has less impact on driveways and approaches, Schaub said, it is more hazardous. My 46 years of experience with plowing snow to the middle did not include sliding on ice due to water from melting snow in the center windrow freezing in the traffic lane. In the fall, I would slide once or twice on snow-packed side streets when coming to a stop at a stop sign before entering a plowed street. This was no fault of the city. I simply had not yet adjusted to driving in the snow. I do not remember ever sliding on a plowed street. There is another aspect to the thawing and freezing of snowmelt. Talk to any civil engineer and he or she will tell you that a puddle or a pool of standing water, which repeatedly thaws and freezes, is a perfect pothole incubator. Filling the gutter with plowed snow plugs the lateral drains so the water from melting snow has nowhere to go. So it gets to work making potholes. I told Mr. Butterfield in 2016 when I visited with him in his office that it was a good thing that the city purchased a pothole repair machine, because in a few years, the city sure is going to need it on plowed streets. The statement highlighted in green states that it was also suggested that residents, especially those with four-wheelers and plows, can work together to plow sidewalks and driveways in their neighborhoods. That good neighbor dynamic was strong in our neighborhood when snow was plowed to the center. A neighbor from across the street to the north, not necessarily the same neighbor each time, would clear the long stretch of sidewalk bordering the pasture across the street from us and go beyond the canal bridge. The same occurred on our side of the street. Individuals would clear snow beyond their personal property lines, and we would see a number of pedestrians on pretty much a daily basis. That stopped when the city started plowing snow to the curb. Individuals would clear their driveways and sidewalks to their boundary. They knew they would have to repeat this procedure the following day, possibly have to do it by hand, because the snow that the city dumped on the sidewalk and driveway might be too hard and heavy for a snowblower. The good neighbor dynamic is still alive and well. It is expressed in a different way now. More than once, an individual driving along has stopped and offered to help my husband shovel snow. While Carl has not accepted the help, it has always been a big morale boost to him that someone cared enough to stop. Now that individuals in our neighborhood have to clear their sidewalks and driveways twice, first after the storm, then after the city, their time is pretty well used up. So there are portions of sidewalk that do not get cleaned, such as that along the pasture across the street and the sidewalk over the canal on both sides of the street. And there are consecutive days when I see no pedestrians. With each storm, a pall seems to settle over our neighborhood. The heavier the snowfall, the heavier the pall. After being on the receiving end of both methods of snow removal, it finally occurred to me what the basic difference is between the two methods. On the one hand, we are set upon by the tactics of a bully. On the other hand, we are assisted by a good neighbor. I looked up the word bully in Merriam-Webster's International Dictionary. The definition reads in part, one, harsh or cruel to others, weaker or smaller than himself. That accurately describes the situation Eileen Way describes in her letter to the editor, a copy of which I have attached, which says in part, the city sent out a letter ordering people to keep the sidewalks clear from snow. That would be easier if the city didn't plow into the gutters. The melting we have had has made these tall walls of hard snow melt onto the sidewalks. More snow shoveling for the homeowners and office workers, all because of the city's new method of doing things. And getting out of your car trying to make it to the sidewalk over one of these ice dams is murder. That definition, one, harsh or cruel to others, weaker or smaller than himself, also describes a situation Linda McCasey describes in his letter to the editor, a copy of which is attached, which says in part, the city has changed the way snow is plowed, now being pushed up to the curbs. Also, at the same time, many people now have to start pulling their miniature dumpsters out to the gutter when they didn't have to before. It is a lot harder to do that when there is a foot-high wall of hard snow and ice in the way. I have tried to help a friend from church who is older, but my best suggestion for him is going to be to let the trash fill up in the dumpster for another week instead of trying to heave the dumpster over this man-made bank of snow and then heave it again to put it back. In both cases described above, a good neighbor approach would have been to plow the snow to the middle so plowed snow would not melt and run across the sidewalk and freeze, making it dangerous to walk on the sidewalk. And in the other case, there would be no foot-high wall of snow to hinder the elderly person getting his dumpster to the pickup spot. A bully would plow snow to the curb, blocking the driveway of handicapped individuals, preventing them from exiting their home. A good neighbor would plow the snow to the center and not block the driveway of the handicapped, giving them the freedom to get on with their various activities outside the home, like going to the grocery store. A bully would plow snow to the curb, dumping snow on cleaned sidewalks, forcing the owners to clean the sidewalk a second time. A good neighbor would plow the snow to the center, dumping no snow on any sidewalks, so the owners would have to clean their portion of the sidewalk only once after a storm. A bully would plow snow to the curb, plowing cars in, forcing the owners to stand dangerously in the traffic lane to shovel his or her car out in order to go anywhere. A good neighbor would plow the snow to the center so individuals could readily drive from legal parking places on the street. 2016, which according to the Weather Service was the third snowiest year on record for Riverton, did a fine job of exposing the many weaknesses or problems inherent in the method of plowing snow to the curb. When a really big snowstorm comes, it presents enough of its own problems without the situation being made worse by using a method of snow removal so inherently flawed as plowing to the curb is. It sure would lighten the load produced by a storm, any storm, heavy or light, if the city would be a good neighbor and use the good neighbor method of plowing snow to the center of the street. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, for calling my attention to this meeting tonight, and I thank you for your attention and the council members for their attention.
Thank you, Mrs. Anderson.
Mr. Mayor, City Council, my name is Travis Becker. I am a small business owner along with my wife on West Main. And I want to let you know of the travails that we encountered last year with this plowing to the side. Our business relies on foot traffic, on people being able to park either on Main Street or to drive into my driveway and park into my parking lot. My parking lot is plowed. My sidewalks are plowed until your trucks come by and fill the sidewalks again. Last year, I could not get a single customer to park in front of the business. There were many attempts made. Everyone failed. I myself had to push out numerous individuals to try and get them back into the traffic lane because the snow was too deep. I have a gate that they can come through. They can't make it through there. At times, there were 2-foot drifts that even my four-wheel pickup truck had a hard time getting through. On one occasion, I actually called Mr. Butterfield. I had him come and take a look at what the damage was with the plowing to the side. I waited and waited for the city to come and plow out a little bit for people to come through. It didn't happen. I ended up having to pay a private service to do it, as I don't have a plow on the front of my truck. I will say when you had it plowed to the middle of the road, customers can park. They can do business. When they do business, I collect sales tax. In essence, every business owner is nothing better than a tax collector. That's what we do, as well as providing a service. Without those folks able to do the business, I'm not allowed to collect that tax that helps pay for the services that we expect and is provided by the city. I would ask you to reconsider the plowing methods going to the side on Main and in particular up on West Main. I don't, to this day, still understand why we treat the rest of the city different than downtown? Downtown is taken care of. Why is everybody else, whether it's Federal or West Main, why are they treated different? That makes no sense. We are all business owners. We're all citizens. We should all be treated the same. And by being treated the same, it needs to be plowed into the middle. When you plow to the side, you're doing extra work for that. You're having to take your plows and those rotary blades twice, once this way and once this way. You put it into the middle, you can rotary that once. So I'm not seeing where you're making any sense in saving any money by putting it to the side. I'd ask you to reconsider that as you move forward with this. Thank you.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Mayor and City Council, my name's Doug Novotny, and I live in a little bit kind of a unique place in the Riverton area. I'm right on the edge of the city boundaries, but I still am in the city. On one side of the highway where it is you leave Adams, and if you go out Adams, you go out Riverview. And I think everybody that's been around town knows where the Oddfellow Cemetery is, the old one. It's an old cemetery down there off of Riverview. It's before you get to the big curve, and it's right below the college. If you went south off the College Hill, you'd run into my place. And I've got a fair amount of land that borders that Riverview. Well, I had a daycare center there, and it was amazing because when we had that bad snow, they actually pushed it to the side, like everybody else in the meeting tonight has been talking about. It does not work. It will not work. They pushed it to the side of my place and completely blocked that daycare center in. There's two little ladies that run that daycare. Their husbands work. They run the daycare. They were unable to get a truck, get any vehicles to get out. If there would have been a fire or an accident, one of them children, they would have been sunk because there was 3-foot drift in front of that daycare all the way. And I have a bunch of trees on the north side. I understand it's on the south side, and the trees make shade. So I get added ice and added this. And with this daycare being there, the little lady that ran it, she's not doing business there anymore. Well, probably one of the biggest reasons is she felt it pretty darn unsafe that she couldn't get the kids in and out without climbing over a fort of snow to get to the car on the other side of the lane. And the other side of the lane, if you gentlemen know, on Riverview is a pretty good-sized street. A lot of people live out there past my place, the golf course. That street is very, very wide. It's a pretty nice street. They've just done some of it. I've got a walking path on both sides. But on the north side of that street, there's absolutely nothing over there. Canal and excessive dirt, slat. Goes into a little berm. And that snow could be pushed over there one time, all through that straight part. And not down by the houses. You get closer to Riverton, I realize it gets busier. But, and another situation is I talked to Mr. Schaub, and he said that he would come out and take care of it, and I never seen the man or a piece of equipment ever come to the property to do anything about it, nor did I get a response from him later. And I just find it appalling that the city's willing to take a situation and make it really a death trap for young children that can't get out of the building to get to the vehicles as they needed. The ambulance couldn't even get to that building. I went up with my tractor and I did what I could, but it was frozen solid. And it took all I could do to spend 3 or 4 days to get that buff down enough where they could get to it. And I have a large gravel parking lot too. It's not a small parking lot. It's not 1 or 2 stalls. I live the north side of the river. The north side of Riverview is in the city. I'm on the south side. I'm not in the city. So it's a matter of being from the center line out. So technically, that road gets taken care of, by the city, and it's actually a county road there. And I understand they work together, which is great. But when the county did it, they pulled it to the middle, or they pulled it across the road. They asked us as homeowners, or people that own the property, how we wish to have it done. We never had a problem until the city started doing it and pushing it in my driveways. I have another rental up there they did the same thing to, and the guy couldn't get his horses out because the gates were completely full of snow. I'm amazed after listening to the other people here in town that they have the same situation, and I have the same situation, and mine was kind of escalated by tenfold because it covers a half a mile of property from the cemetery down by Eli Bebout's all the way past. I own the property all the way past up to almost Ryan Road. There's a large piece of property there that gets plowed to the side of the road. You can't get into pick your horses. That's not a big thing. I can come from the back. The other homeowners don't have that option. The other renters don't have that option. And it's just amazing that I'm just like the other gentleman. I'm asking that the city look long and hard about this, pushing it to the side. And if they are pushing it to the side, they better watch where they're pushing it, because if they close somebody off and they can't get to it on an ambulance, an emergency situation, then the city's going to come across and be liable for that mistake. There's only so much I can do as a homeowner, and I will do what it takes to work with the city, but I'm not going to tolerate what happened last year on that property. It just doesn't make good sense. So that's all I would say.
Thank you.
Mr. Mayor and Council, my name's Ron Warpness. I guess this is the evening that we beat up on the city for a while, but I'm going to pile on. I think many of you know that I own the USDA building on Broadway. And last year, I ended up hiring 71 Construction with one of their big loaders to come and move the snow out from in front of that building so people could park. And that's the first time since we've owned that building from 75 till now that we've had to do that. And I've got a little four-wheel blade on it that normally I can just push the snow off to the sidewalk. The lease that I have with USDA requires the sidewalks to be clean, requires there to be parking spaces, and it's impossible to do when you've got 18 inches of ice that's been pushed, and yet 10 feet away you've got beautiful driving lanes. Boy, people are zipping by and everybody's happy, except the property owners. And Mr. Apodaca is correct regarding the storm sewers. I went out 2 or 3 times and chopped holes in the storm sewer so that the water could get off, flow down through the curb and gutter. It's just an impossible situation, but that cost me over $700 to have that snow removed in that one event. $150 an hour for a loader and an operator. And if I have the piece of property across Broadway so that I could have them put the snow there. If they had to haul it away on a truck, that probably would have been another $100 for the dump truck. So anyway, I hope you reconsider this pushing to the sidewalks, because it just is killing businesses and property owners and whatnot. I'd rather that you just leave it on the ground, let it snowpack, I guess. But anyway, that's my 2 cents on the subject. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ron.
Mayor, Councilman. My name is Matt Post. I got a small business here in town. I actually plow snow, so you guys do me a little bit of a favor. Last year I got about 90 lots we take care of, and last year it was nonstop. I would plow. Before I get back to the shop, they would call, ask me to come back, try to plow it out. I'd plow it out in the street. I swear you guys are watching me, because half hour later you'd come back and plow it back right back where I plowed it out of. So that's just something that, it made me money because I got to charge all those guys every time I came back. But all the business owners, we got to do something. And if I could just ask a question, why do you do it that way? Can you give me an answer why you plow it to the sidewalk?
Well, I think the discussion that I have been in the past is that if you drive on the highway or the county road in the wintertime, you will discover after a few days the highway is bare and dry. You hit the city limits of Riverton and it's snowpack. And it stays snowpack all winter long. And the idea was that if we plowed to the side, like we do on the highway, that we would have clear travel lanes. And to some degree, I think that's correct. We do get clear travel lanes by doing it that way. But we create other problems. And so I'm not sure that we've satisfied anybody, but my problem is, the city council's problem is, let me editorialize for just a minute.
Not a problem.
Okay? I think the problem that we're faced with is that we have a limited amount of money to spend on the removal of snow. And how we actually make that decision, I'm not exactly certain, because we do not have a snow removal budget. Instead of that, what we have is a budget to buy sand and salt. Okay, that's a line item. And all the rest of this cost comes out of other division line items. Okay, which means that if we spend $100,000 removing snow, then that's $100,000 that we don't have to spend on maintaining streets and alleys and other ways. And so everybody looks at that from a standpoint of how can we do this as economically as possible. So what we're always faced with is, at budget time, is try to figure out how can we run the city as economically as we possibly can. Okay, and when we talk about snow removal, there is absolutely no limit to the cost. Okay?
True.
We would like, everybody in this town would like it if somehow the city could park a dump truck on every square foot of the city street when the snow starts to fall, and then in the morning, jump in and move the dump trucks away, and then there would be no snow on any street for any amount of time. Well, it's impossible. I figured it up last year. It would take us 100 days to pick up the snow in Riverton and move it away someplace if we could find a place for that to go. Well, what solves the problem? The sun comes out, the wind blows, and it's gone in a couple of days. But in a winter like we had last year, where we just got piles and piles and piles of snow, you know, and then we wind up with, we got 2 snow blowers. One of them broke the first week, okay, and then the second week, the second one broke, and so there you are. So it's not like we can run down to Napa and buy a bolt and fix it. You know, it's a piece of specialized equipment. And so then we wind up waiting weeks to get the repair parts. And it keeps snowing. I don't know how to solve that. I don't know how to solve that problem so that every person in Riverton is totally satisfied with snow removal that we are able to do. But at some point, there have to be able to say there's got to be a limit to the amount of money that we'll spend on snow removal. That can't be the only thing that the city of Riverton is focused on, is to make sure that we've removed every flake of snow off the streets.
Well, I don't think that's what anybody's asking for. I mean, I've plowed snow for 23 years. So I know cost and expense and everything, but you can't tell me if you plow the snow to the side of the street and then take your snow blower and run it up that side.
Well, I'm sure that's...
And run it down that side.
And that's what we ran into. That's what we ran into last year. But I'm sure that there's other occasions where we've had a little bit of snow. And we plowed that off the side of the side, and the travel lanes went bare right away, and then we had a warm day, and all the snow that we plowed the side melted and never had to get picked up.
Yep. And I think if you're going to plow to the outside, maybe do it from March on. I mean, I've lived in Wyoming my whole life. I don't know how long you've lived here, but in December, January, February, It don't get very warm.
Well, that's right, and what did,
The outside, you're going to do nothing
Yeah.
to create ice. The
and
whole,
last year, that first snowstorm was Thanksgiving? The holiday,
it
right?
actually was before Thanksgiving. It was on the 6th, and then we had the one on Thanksgiving,
See, and then another one.
Yep.
We had 3 really good storms.
Christmas.
And then it did get cold, and then you're not going to get rid of any of that snow. So this has been a real challenge, okay? It continues to be a challenge. And we've tried to put together a policy here where we're going to say if there's any kind of significant snowfall, we're going to plow the center.
And I think that's a good thing. I just think you also got to look at the aspect if you get a 4-inch snow today and you plow to the outside, and you get a 4-inch snow next week and you plow to the outside, and you get a 4-inch snow 3 days after that and you plow to the side, you got the exact same problem all over again.
Right.
So I think that's something, in my personal opinion, plowing snow, if you're going to plow the outside, march on. The rest of the time, plow it to the center. Because it's not going to melt unless you throw your ice melt on it. You throw your ice melt on it, it works during the day, but then it freezes at night.
Sure.
So,
Oh, yeah, big challenge for us. Okay, thank you.
my food of thought.
Your Honor, would you like to help answer that question as well?
You bet, go right in.
And I appreciate the coverage, and I appreciate the feedback that we're getting from the public. One of the reasons why we started looking at different options was the travel lanes and clearing the transportation network. One of the challenges that our crews have faced from a time standpoint is plowing to the center, specifically on our main corridors. We have to open up the turn areas, and it takes more time. And so we were tasked with the job of finding a way to make our lanes clear. And so we did it to the side because we can make the lanes clear by plowing to the side. There are negative consequences, and we definitely appreciate the feedback that we're getting from the community on that. And yes, we do focus on clearing those curbs, and that's an investment of time as well. But when a snowstorm comes, that could be at 2 p.m., it could be at 2 a.m., it could be at noon, could be at 5 when everybody's on the road. So there's a certain variability with each storm, and we try and dispatch the resources we have to clear the transportation network. And I think we did do a good job in trying some new options. I don't believe that there's anything wrong in trying to advance and try things, but feedback is good as well from the community. I think we've been successful in clearing the transportation network. However, there have been negative externalities associated with that, and this is where we appreciate the feedback we're getting from you as our governing body. But the reason why we started looking at the side was to clear the lanes faster for the traveling public.
So how many cars a day on Federal?
20,000.
How many cars a day on Main Street?
10,000.
How many cars on Sunset?
I can look that up. I have it in my folder.
I knew I'd get down to the point where you wouldn't be able to snap that off, yeah. Okay.
That's funny.
Okay.
The point is we're not looking for a magic wand. Is any of the city of Riverton.
Okay,
We're asking for you to look at.
all right. Okay, so here's the problem that I see, as I see it. Okay, is it so? Explain who runs the snow plows and the dump trucks.
Your Honor, we have streets and alleys employees that are tasked with the responsibility of running plow trucks. We do have the 3 plow trucks. We are able to pull on our yard waste employees because we don't do a lot of yard waste operations in the winter. We can typically count on 7 employees to help us with snow removal operations. That's 5 streets and alleys employees, 1 pulling from weed and pest, and then an additional 2 from the yard waste operations.
Okay, so we've got seven guys that we can devote to that, and they can work. And they don't. And if it snows really big, they don't have anything else to do but move snow.
Your Honor, that is correct.
That's about right. Okay, but then we got garbage truck drivers. They're not involved in this, are they?
Your Honor, that's correct.
Okay, so could we call garbage truck drivers in for some overtime on Saturday or something like that?
Your Honor, we could do it with our residential collection. Our commercial garbage truck driver does run on Saturday.
Okay, all right,
Additional 2 employees.
okay. So during the summertime, do we hire seasonal employees?
Your Honor, that's correct. We hire seasonal employees to assist us with parks, yard waste, and when we can budget, we bring them in on streets as well.
Okay, and so then would any of those individuals come with commercial driver's licenses and operate heavy equipment and that type of thing?
Depending on their duties, Your Honor, they can have that CDL.
But I guess are we talking about a manpower issue, or are we talking more of an equipment issue? I mean, it's my understanding we're looking at an equipment issue, not as much of a manpower issue. Is that correct?
Your Honor, I will say that I will take any employee as much as we can, but we have an equipment issue. The challenge we have with snow removal is once we get behind a storm, we're behind a storm until April, and that ice pack occurs, and that's why the comment is accurate where people would drive on the highway and then get into town and they'd be riding on snowpack. And that's because we would get behind a storm, and once the ice pack would occur, it didn't matter how many times we would plow that road, you're just riding on top of the ice. One thing that I think we have been very conscientious of is we dispatch our plows currently at snow levels at 1/2 of an inch and growing. Every other community I've looked at in the state of Wyoming does it at 4 inches, and that's where we used to be. With our limited plows, by getting out earlier and moving the snow and allowing the blacktop to assist us with Mother Nature melting, we get those lanes cleaner faster. Otherwise, you're riding on the snowpack. And so it's a challenge of timing, it's a challenge of equipment, and we have priorities to follow. We have to do the arterials and the collectors, the hills, all the safety locations. And once we get through that, your day's over, and the other areas of town have already received enough traffic that you're just behind. And so you maintain the junk snow that gets kicked up. You try and maintain the ruts that occur from the heavy traffic. But that was one of our main goals is let's get ahead of these storms. Let's get our lanes clear so that our transportation network is safe. And we definitely understand the feedback that we're getting, and I wish that we could patent a machine that could eat snow and then never do anything with it after. That doesn't exist. With every storm, it has to go somewhere, center side or picked up and piled somewhere.
Thank you. Mike?
Thanks, Your Honor. Mr. Butterfield, if we did approve buying the additional snowplow truck, you're saying we do have the manpower to put in it to drive it?
Your Honor, we do. So when we look at our 7 available employees, those employees get into 3 trucks, 2 sanders, and then we try and get employees in our 2 graders as well. Once the snow is plowed, then we start shifting towards our pickup operations. So we drop the plows off the trucks, get the 3 employees in the trucks, get employees in a loader and grader, and then they pick up the snow. So what we would have is an employee that we currently put in a grader, our 2nd grader, we could put them in the plow truck.
And then we have 2 snow blowers, basically, and those go on the front end loaders? And can that loader be used without the snow blower and then put right on, or do you have to permanently mount it on the front end loader?
Your Honor, Councilman Bailey, it can be removed.
Okay.
Mr. Apodaca?
Yeah, one more comment.
Come up and talk on the mic. People at home are tuned in.
All right. The comment that I want to make is that, when you're comparing county roads and highways thrown to the side, these plows on the highways and county roads are coming by 6.0, and they're throwing it clear out there, and there's no curb. And still, when you're talking about economics, the cost that it's going to cost the city to repair the damage that's done to this curb, when that water sits there at night, like right now, it freezes at night. So what happens when they push it to the side, the sun comes out and melts it for a little bit, it runs to the curb, and then it freezes underneath there. and then they try to remove it with the rotary machine, and it won't do it, and that's why they keep breaking part of it. I've talked to a guy in Lander, and he says that's one reason they don't do it. It freezes there, and then they're trying to load ice, and then they have to get the grader out. So here comes another piece of equipment. They're hitting the curb, they're damaging the curb, and while that's happening, the water that accumulates goes in between the asphalt and the curb, and you start having this heaving, and pretty soon, and then when all the snow's gone, you know what happens? Where it heaved, that's where the water goes, and you start having the asphalt go to heck. And it doesn't make any sense to take it to the side. The next day, after they take it to the side, you're trying to keep them lanes open, they're blocking it anyway because they got a grader on that side and they got a dump truck there. And if the rotaries broke down and then they've got a big load, it doesn't make any sense to take it to the side at all. Not at all. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess sometime we'll get a policy that we'll adopt, huh?
Your Honor, we would appreciate any direction from the council, or if you would like to amend the policy that's presented to you this evening.
Can we take action tonight, or? Sure we can.
Well, I think
We're in a work session right now. We need to reconvene to regular session.
We're in a work session, but
Got to reconvene anyway, to get out of here. So.
True.
Your Honor, if I may, within a work session, it's perfectly acceptable to my understanding for the council to give some direction to hear comments. You don't have it on your formal agenda this evening. It'll be presented at the next agenda for your consideration, at which point you can make normal amendments as you see fit. However, in order to provide you information and any repercussions or impacts that might have, it would help for us to have a little bit of information. We've heard a number of different comments, and those are appreciated. However, again, any direction you have is helpful. I would point out that this policy is developed a little different than I have seen in the past, and in a very good way. Specifically with regard to the fact that it is developed in a manner that allows you to review it on a more consistent basis than a lot of other policies. So it's part of the plan of this policy is that you consistently review it, that you consistently provide metrics. Those things aren't as common as one might think. So not only any direction that you have now can still be amended as we spoke throughout the year, throughout the season, if we're running up on a situation that we didn't see. I think that's one of the strengths of this particular policy. But backing up to my original point, direction is appreciated and can be given within a work session.
Your Honor.
Mr. Godey.
I think it is worthy to look at opportunities for a number of these roads that are listed. I'm not sure what page it is. Anyway, to look at plowing to center as an additional option. I think we've heard some good input that seem to indicate there's some arguments where in areas where there are businesses or residences on these main streets that are identified, that plowing to the center under the right condition makes sense. And so I guess I throw the challenge out of re-examining a few of these roads to see if there's an opportunity to plow to center, period, not plow to center or plow to side until 4 inches, then to center. That maybe things like Main Street and Federal, the entire Main Street and Federal, have an opportunity for plow to center. I just throw that challenge out there to see what would be the impacts, especially if we add a new truck that can haul off some of that snow. maybe that might be the difference between doing it and not doing it efficiently, for example.
Your Honor.
Go ahead.
Definitely appreciate the feedback from Councilman Godey. The current policy simply lists the prioritized streets for us to provide snow and ice control. And the policy does just mention that a combination approach will be applied, but it doesn't mention which street or which prioritized area will receive it. So we can definitely be malleable under the current policy. The staff report mentions the accumulation option of 4 inches or greater. It mentions the street width option. But those are ways that staff enact the policy that's before you. So I believe we have verbiage in there currently that allows us to address Mr. Godey's concern.
But I guess I'm just looking, Your Honor.
Go ahead.
I'm just looking at this, though, and if we're just saying plowed aside at all times, I mean, for example, you know, why can't we say the same thing as we have on Broadway, plowed aside until 4 inches and then to center? Why can't we say the same thing then on Main Street? I see what you're saying, that this does provide that flexibility. But it seems like we've got an issue where we're getting our citizens and our businesses buried in snow, and I think they've got a legitimate concern, and I think if we can solve it, let's solve it, and let's do it policy-wise rather than just sitting here and saying we can be flexible. Let's figure out a way to do it without having to work our way around this policy. Let's build it into the policy rather than having to work around what's in the policy. I get what you're saying with it, I do, but I don't know. It's just frustrating to me to hear so many people that have been impacted by this and not have a direct way that we can address it.
Your Honor.
Go ahead.
We can definitely propose a very definite and finite solution centered aside. However, the reason why we wanted to take several approaches this winter is so that we don't establish a policy that potentially has the wrong method in it, and then we would be looking at changing at it. We would be looking at changing it relatively quick. So prior to getting something in black and white, what we proposed was, let's try a couple options and find what works best from feedback that you as council members receive, from feedback we as staff receive. As far as the center and side options, we can base it off of accumulation, we can base it off of street width, we can look at other variables like you've mentioned as far as residential streets or business corridors, or you could simply direct us to go exactly back to where we were and put it in the center. So there's a definite way to do it, but we want to do it right. And the only way to do it right is to get some data on it.
Mr. Larson.
But we've got data. We've got 2 years of data. Now, the only data that we're really interested in is, will it snow that hard? Because we had last year, we had the data of last year, which most of the audience will say was a failure because it didn't help them. Now, personally, myself, East Main is plowed to the center, but West Main is plowed to the sides, and that was a total failure. Those are all witnesses of the failure. So what data are we talking about? There's your data. The data's already in. We don't know what the accumulation is going to be, but we know right now, without a shadow of a doubt, if we have a snow year like we had last year, and we continue on the same way we did last year, we're going to have twice as many people at the next snow meeting, and they will come with pitchforks.
So, Your Honor, I guess maybe we need to give some direction that the default should be plow to center. I mean, I understand. I don't think we need to get, as city council, we don't need to be calling Kyle at 2 a.m. and saying, today's the day you plow to the center as opposed to plowing to the side. Or we're not going to get that because I totally respect what you're saying, is that you need some guidance, but the professionals will make decisions as needed, as warranted, and that's the way it should be. It shouldn't be us calling them at 2 in the morning. They should have some direction so that they can do their jobs. So if the default is generally plow to the center whenever possible, then I think that gives them enough understanding that our goal is, and the goal is not plowing in businesses or residences whenever possible. And I like the idea of the Public Works number, giving that out and making sure that, if something happens, there's, somebody, a plow misses an entrance and plows it in, that there's an opportunity for the public to make a complaint and that we respond to it. That we've got, if we're going to put that number out there, we have to be prepared to respond. But I think we can do this with the flexibility, but also the understanding that we have a certain default, and it's not to default to plow people in. That should not be the default.
So what's the impact to the pavement from plowing to the center and having that windrow there? I understand what happens is that windrow's been there for a week or 10 days, and that's hard as a brick. And so then it becomes very difficult to pick that up and with the snowblower. So it's kind of like if you get the windrow laid up there and then an hour later you can come by and pick it up, that works pretty good. But if you plow too far ahead, then what you wind up with is the windrow's immovable.
Your Honor, I'll attempt to answer your question, and please let me know if I get off track. I appreciate Mr. Apodaca's experience and his feedback. However, I think it is safe to say that any winter season is bad on roads. The expansion and contraction that occurs because of temperature, and then whether we plow to the side or the center does not alleviate water entering any cracks in the roadway or between the curb and gutter. Again, if we get behind a storm and we're plowing to the center, that snowpack is still located close to those joints. And so there's still a potential hazard to our infrastructure. And that's something that I take very seriously because I have the responsibility of maintaining those roads in the summer as well as in the winter. And so the assumption of the roads being bare by going to the center might not cover every single street, and we would still have issues of ice buildup, snowpack that get into cracks not only in the asphalt but also in the joint between the concrete and the asphalt. I definitely understand that by going to the side it does push a lot of that snow to the curb, and I agree that it needs to be collected, and that's what we do. The issue of snow turning into ice, it occurs also in the center of the travel lane, and it's just as hard for our blower to pick up, and we have to break it up either with a loader or a grader, either way, because it still freezes. And so that the easy statement is every winter is hard on your concrete and asphalt infrastructure, period, no matter what you do. And we definitely appreciate the feedback because our investment in summer operations is just as critical as our investment in winter operations.
I just have one comment and then I'm done.
Okay.
Come up to the...
You want to use the mic?
My comment is we keep talking about what it's going to damage. I've known Mr. Apodaca my whole life. He's been in a contracting business and then concrete his whole life. And I would say he's probably the best inspection service you could ever ask for, and it's free. It's what he does for a living. It's amazing that we're going to argue over data and stuff that's irrelevant.
Okay.
All I'm saying is I expect this winter when I call down there and that little house is blocked in and they can't get out, and if I make a phone call, somebody better respond. There's another problem you have with the city. They do not respond to our situation, and they better respond to it. There's no reason that they can't pick up the phone and say, we're doing the best we can, we're doing whatever, instead of just blowing you off. And that's what's happened by everybody in here and myself. And that stuff has got to stop.
Thank you. Mike?
I guess I would agree with what Lance and Tim have said, is that I think on these major streets, I think we need to prioritize plowing to the center unless there's just a very minor amount of snow. I think that doesn't matter probably because it's going to melt and it's not going to bury anybody in. And I think that has to be our top priority, is not burying people in. And to your credit, last year, we did have clear driving lanes, but you couldn't get off the street. So, there's a mixed blessing there. So, thanks.
Tim?
I think in particular, Mr. Becker, you had mentioned this. In terms of you being stuck in, covered in snow and everything, that really would not be an issue with the just 4 inches or less, would you think? If they plowed to the side, like we have here for some of the others, like Webwood, Broadway, plow to the side until 4 inches and then to center, do you think that would probably address the issues that you had last year?
Probably not, and here's why. Because what you're doing is you're plowing 2 lanes of traffic. You're plowing, and possibly 2.5 lanes of traffic. On Main Street, you have 2 lanes going west, 2 lanes going east. You have a turning lane, and then you have 2 parking lanes. So you've got, in essence, maybe 5 or 6 lanes. If your blades are plowing to the middle of that turn lane and plowing over and plowing both travel lanes, you're taking 4 inches all the way across, and now you're putting it into the traffic where they're going to park. That's not going to work. You're moving this 4 inches that is probably a width of 30 feet at 4 inches, and now you're putting it into the parking area? No, you've buried it. And last year, let's admit it, I'm on the county commission. We've never seen that kind of snow. We've never seen that moisture since I've been around. It was an anomaly. We did the best we could. We found out last year that plowing to the side doesn't work. It hurt the businesses. I can't do business if I can't get customers to my door. And even with 4 inches put to the side, I'm out of business. And in order for me to try and get back into business, I'm going to have to probably call a plow company and hope that he's not busy enough to come over and clean out my drive-in and try and plow out somehow the parking lane that's on Main Street in order to get customers there. Let's not forget, it's my responsibility to take care of my sidewalks, but I can't take care of the sidewalks when those trucks continue to put that back on the sidewalk. I can't keep up with it. And at some point, somebody's going to get hurt. Thankfully, nobody did last year on my property. I just don't want to see that happen again. And for years, plowing to the middle worked. I understand we want to try things. I'm all for it. But I think we saw last year it didn't work, especially when you had the accumulations that we did. So even with the 4 inches, I'm going to say absolutely not. I'll be right back into the same thing where I'm having to push people out.
You agree with that, Mr. Apodaca, with your situation too? You think it wouldn't solve anything?
I do agree with that because 4 inches of snow, and then if you get a warm spell, then you get that deep water, and you're blocking all the storm drains. And several times last year, I took my own equipment and I cleared the storm drain so it could drain. And that's what they're there for. And so whether or not it freezes in the middle, at least, when it runs off, it's ground to the curb, and at least the storm drain's going to take care of it. Thanks.
I just don't know. I mean, I agree, in theory, it seems like it would work that way, but I just don't know that it does with some of these areas, and I guess I'm discouraged, and I think, to a certain extent, and I think Mr. Becker's right, to a certain extent, we have an anomalous year when we're trying to do something that maybe would work a different year. But just last year, man, it really didn't work. And so I think I'm hesitant to say, let's just never do it again. I don't think that that's the answer, because I think there are times it could work. And so I do like the idea of being able to respond and not just say, let's just always plow it to the center, because there might be times when it does work. But I don't know, I even hesitate to think in some of these areas to say, do the plow to the side until 4 inches, then to the center. But I do appreciate the idea that the idea is that the policy is flexibility.
Do you have any direction?
Pray it don't snow.
That's the best direction of the night.
There you go.
Your Honor, I believe we have received some direction, and we'll try to make the changes according to your wishes and present something to you at the next meeting. With that in mind, at that time, we'll be able to be more specific if there's something different, if we didn't understand or we interpreted something wrong at that point. You'll have the opportunity to do incremental changes as you see fit via motion. So I think we can bring you something that can be worked with.
Okay. So just so that you know my thoughts, it seems to me like if we plow to the side and we block a driveway where, had we not plowed at all, the driveway would still be functional. They'd be on ice pack, but it'd still be functional. Then we have it seems like we have some kind of, I know so many cities plow to the side. I know that's very common. They plow to the side. I'm just wondering if their climates are such that they may get that 3-foot snowstorm in Buffalo, New York. Okay, they plow to the side of the road. About a week later, it's mostly gone because the wind blew and the temperature was above freezing and it melted and ran off. And our situation is where it just sticks around. If you plow that up and it builds, and pretty soon we've got this big bunch of snow there that we can't deal with. And I know on Broadway, 2 months later, we were still out there with a blade grading away, and we gradually were getting stuff picked up and moved away and that kind of thing. But it seemed, I guess the question is it easier to plow to the center of the road and cut an occasional street crossing into that? Is that easier than plowing to the side of the road and then coming back and clearing everybody's driveway? And it just seems to me like it would be better to plow it to the middle of the road, and then if we can't get around and make it go away, we just didn't get around and ever make it go away until the sun came out and it warmed up. And just say that's the way it was this year, that's what we could accomplish. And with as much equipment as we could get, then what's a snowblower worth, Everything seems to cost $250,000 anymore.
Your Honor, 300,000, just kidding. We purchased that a couple years ago, and if I remember correctly, it was an attachment to the loader we purchased, and it was around $75,000 to $100,000 just for the attachment.
Okay.
Please don't quote me on that.
I'm not trying to hold you to a number, no, but.
It was expensive. They have one of those in stock, right?
Napa.
Okay. Okay, and so we've got 2 blowers, and they're ready to go?
Your Honor, we primarily use the newer one because the older one was replaced for a reason. We had we had to do a considerable amount of retrofitting to even get it running to help us when the new one went down.
Right. But they're ready to run?
Yes, Your Honor. In fact, we did our dry run for the season last week, and a truck that was running great all summer broke down on us. So we're glad that it broke down
Now.
last week in a dry run than it did when it was actually snowing. So
Sure. And then when you actually put a load on it, that'll be different. Okay, so then the snowplow that we're talking about from the airport in Gillette, is that like a normal-sized piece of equipment, or is that a specialized FAA-approved and designed snowplow with a 28-foot blade?
Your Honor, it's not a large snow plow and truck like you see at the airport. It's I believe a 5 cubic yard bed and a 10-foot blade, so it's very appropriate to put on our streets.
Okay. Thank you. The chair would entertain a motion to reconvene into special meeting.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We're back in regular session. The chair would entertain a motion to adjourn the special meeting.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Been moved and seconded that we adjourn the special meeting. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? We are adjourned at 9:15. Thanks, everybody that came and commented, and we'll continue to work on this. And if the friction and the heat was of any value, there won't be a drop of snow that'll stick on the streets.